Lo, the latest receiver of his grace. Great potential dwells within you, doubtless, for you to be chosen thusly. Prove yourself worthy of this gift.
In Radiance, judgment.
Hey everybody, hope you all are doing well, and welcome to another Lords of the Fallen video. Today I'm going to see if I can beat Lords of the Fallen by only leveling Radiance. I start off by picking the Radiant Purifier class, which starts with 18 Radiance, which is pretty awesome. So to me, Radiance is pretty similar to Faith in Dark Souls 3. Radiance has a good amount of supportive spells, a few pretty solid offensive spells, and a lot of the Radiance based weapons do a really good amount of damage, and so I am very excited for this run, and I hope you guys are too. I spent way too long making a character who I named Radiant Randy, and with that, our run starts off by taking on Holy Bulwark Auto. And oh my goodness, that is really good damage. Damn. Auto goes down faster than my math grade does, and with him defeated, I make my way through the abandoned village until it was time to face off against Pieta. Because Pieta is a holy based boss, our damage wasn't the best, but it wasn't really that bad either. As you can see, for this fight, I'm actually starting in Umbral, and that's because I'm a greedy bastard when it comes to Souls games, and I want to get as much Souls as possible. So I waited to get a 3 times multiplier for my Vigor before I went to this fight, so I can get a good supply of Vigor early on. I was able to break Pieta's guard a lot during this fight, and with one more critical attack, Pieta temporarily goes down, and I make my way into Skyrest Bridge. While I'm here, I make sure to talk to Dunmire, who is not only the person who we talked to at the beginning of this video, but he's also going to be very important for this run, because he gives a lot of great Radiant spells and weapons, and by following his questline, we're going to get even better Radiant-based equipment that's going to be super helpful for the rest of this run. While I'm here, I pick up the Radiant weapon spell from him, which imbues my weapon with Radiance. This does holy damage, and it also does a good bit of smite buildup, which is very helpful, and I'll explain that throughout the run. Anyway, while I'm here, I also talk to Stunmund, who is also going to be another NPC who's going to be very helpful in this run because his questline, like Dunmire's, gives a lot of good holy equipment. Making my way towards the Pilgrim's Perch Ascent, I say hi to my buddy Legend, and then I pick up my usual supply of Beryllium fragments. And soon it was time to take on Sister Delith. So a little lore here. Maybe you've noticed, but every time I use a Radiant spell, I get a little bit of bleed buildup. And for a long time I was like, why does that happen? And I don't get it. So I did some research, and I found out that the Hollowed Sentinels and followers of Aureus believed that bloodshed was a way to channel Radiance. And so they would either make themselves bleed or make others bleed to channel said Radiance and help purify people and souls they believed were unworthy of Aureus' judgment. And you can actually see this being done during this boss fight. So obviously there is a lot of blood because we're fighting each other, but around the middle of the fight you can actually see Sister Delith hit herself with her flail, and because she does that, she gains this radiant energy. So yeah, there's a little lore tidbit for you guys. I absolutely love the lore of this game, so I think I might start talking about it more often during these videos. So I apologize if I'm geeking out, but I think the lore is very interesting and it's just fun to talk about. While I'm here in Pilgrim's Perch, I pick up the Book of Sin, which is an item that I need to give Exactor Dunmire to progress his questline. I then talk to Gorlinda, where I get her to level up my weapon and my catalyst up to +2. And then it was time to take on the Mistress of Hounds. Damn, that damage is really good. I'm able to break her posture, and after one critical attack, the Mistress of Hounds goes down. I make my way to Skylar's Bridge and talk to Dunmire, where I give him a few items to progress his questline. And then it was time to take on the Congregator of Flesh. The Congregator of Flesh isn't super weak to holy damage, but he sure as hell does need an exorcism, so I figured that I was the perfect man for the job. With one more powerful overhead slash of my radiant weapon, this abomination goes down, and I make my way deeper into the Forsaken Fen. And soon it was time to take on the Hushed Saint. During the fight, I'm able to proc Smite, which is once you fill up the Smite meter, there will be a big lightning strike that hits the enemy and makes them weaker to holy damage. I didn't see a lightning strike, but I'm pretty sure we got the Smite off. Anyway, with the Hushed Saint defeated, I cleanse the first beacon, and then I make my way to Skylar's Bridge, where I pick up the Pilgrim's Perch key from Stonmend. I then circle back to Pilgrim's Perch, where I pick up the Brawn Ring, which increases my strength level by 3. And once I'm outside, I pick up the Hammer of Holy Agony. It does an okay amount of holy and physical damage, but it also does 80 bleed damage, which is one of the reasons why I picked it up, because then I could have an easier time fighting enemies that were more resistant to Radiance. After picking up a few large Beryllium shards, I make my way back to Skylar's Bridge, where I get the Hammer to +3. I get my Radiance up to level 40, and then I head over to Fitzroy's Gorge, where I pick up the Cracked Rune Tablet. I pick up a few regular Beryllium nuggets, and then it was time to challenge the Ruiner to a fight. The Ruiner is pretty weak to Holy and Smite, and damn. Yeah, I can really tell that damage is absolutely insane. So not only is the Ruiner weak to Holy damage, but he's also pretty weak to bleed, and after getting a bleed proc, it wasn't long before I ruined the Ruiner's day. I make a quick trip to Skylar's Bridge, where I get my Holy Hammer up to +5. And then I make my way into Lower Calrath, where it was time to take on the Infernal Enchantress. Oh, man, that damage is insane. After absolutely destroying the Infernal Enchantress, I make my way back to Skylar's Bridge, where I talk to Dunmire and buy the Radiance Radiance spell from him. And with my new spell in hand, it was time to take on the Spurned Progeny. Okay, that damage isn't too bad. So the Spurned Progeny is pretty weak to Holy, but he's immune to all the status effects, so bleed isn't going to be very helpful here. But, again, the damage is looking pretty solid. With this atrocious abomination obliterated, I make my way to Sunless Skeen, where I take on the Skin Stealer. So unlike the Spurned Progeny, the Skin Stealer is relatively weak to bleed, and also we were able to proc a Smite during the fight, which was really helpful. And after a devastating critical attack, this sinner is judged, and for fun, I decided to take on some more sinners, so I make my way a little bit deeper into Sunless Skeen, where I take on a Rio of Treepers. And with a few more holy bonks from my hammer, the Rio of Treepers go down, and with their defeat, I make my way to the Revelation Depths. Now there are tons of Beryllium pieces scattered around the depths, so I made sure to collect as much as I could. And with all those upgrade materials added to my collection, I make my way back to Skyrest Bridge where I get my Hammer of Holy Agony up to +7, and then it was time to head back to the Revelation Depths where I took on the Pledged Knight. So the Pledged Knight is like an ex-hollowed sentinel, so she isn't like super weak to holy damage, but she is pretty weak to bleed, which is why I'm using the Hammer of Holy Agony in this fight, because this weapon deals 80 bleed damage, and with weaknesses aside, our damage in general is actually looking pretty good. With 1 bleed proc, we're able to take out the Pledged Knight, and it was time for phase 2. Somehow I'm able to get 2 heavy attacks off back to back, and because of that I break the Unbroken Promises posture, and the critical attack did some pretty solid damage. And with just a few more bloody bonks, the Unbroken Promise and the Pledged Knight go down. With that boss taken care of, I immediately haul ass over to the Fee for the Chill Curse where I give this crow a bonk. I receive my payment for my exceptional bonking skills. I cleanse the beacon in this area. And then I make my way to Skyrest Bridge where I pick up the Lucent Beam Radiance spell from Dunmire. This is a insanely overpowered spell and I'm pretty excited to use it. And then I make my way to the Leprosium where I talk to my good friend, Legend. It's here that I buy some Smite and Holy Salts, and as I explore the Leprosium, I eventually come across the Abiding Defender duo. Now like the Pledged Knight, this duo isn't super weak to Holy, but they are pretty weak to Bleed, and they also drop a really good Radiant spell once I defeat them. So taking out this boss is going to be very helpful for our run. During this fight, I gave the Lucent Beam Radiant spell a try, and damn that damage. A few bonks later, this duo goes down, and I get my reward, the Divine Arm spell. This thing, my goodness, this thing is overpowered. With that boss taken care of, I make my way through the Tower of Penance, picking up the 3rd and final rune tablet. As I made my way deeper through the tower, I picked up the Bramble Ring, which gives me a little bit of health back whenever I inflict smite on an enemy, which is pretty good, considering that this build is holy and smite heavy. I run right past the lever I was trying to look for, and spend the next 6 years running around in circles trying to find it again. After graduating high school, I finally find the lever, and I continue to make my way through the Tower of Penance until it's time to take on Tancred, Master of Castinations. For this fight, I use Pieta's Sword because it does pure holy damage. It does no physical damage, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it does pure holy damage, and it does some smite build up as well. And while our damage wasn't super insane, it wasn't too bad either. But that Divine Arm spell, that's pretty solid. During the fight, I was able to proc smite, and after that explosion of holy damage, it was time to take on the monstrosity that was phase 2. And because I am just so good at this game, I take down Tancred on the first try. You didn't see anything. I actually died to Tancred on purpose because I wanted another chance to use the Divine Arm spell, and damn, that damage is insane. After hitting a critical attack, it only takes one holy sweep of my blade for Tancred to go down. On the first try. Anyway, after cleansing the beacon on top of the tower, I head back to Skyrise Bridge where I talk to Dunmire and give him the Perception Wisp, which is something that I got in the Tower of Penance. I get my Umbral Lamp up to +2, and then I make my way, surprisingly, back to the Revelation Depths and into the arena that I fought the Pledge Knight because apparently Dunmire is getting pretty interested in Umbral. So I dip my fingers in this water, and when I wake up I'm in the absolutely terrifying realm of the Mother's Lull. How the hell did I get here? While I'm here, I run into Dunmire, and he is rambling on about stuff that definitely isn't good. Guys, I think we lost him. Venturing out of the Mother's Lull, I steal Dunmire's clothes and his equipment because, you know, why wouldn't I do that? I make my way back to Skyrise Bridge where I get the Exactor Scripture up to +6. Now this catalyst is extremely good because once maxed out, it has an S scaling in Radiance, which is awesome. With my new catalyst in hand, I make my way to the Abbey of the Hollowed Sisters where I run into Stunmond, who was the NPC we talked to earlier in the run. And while I'm talking to him, I purchase the Orient Sorcerer's Ring, which increases my holy damage, and I also pick up the Radiant spell, Aureus' Judgment. This is a pretty crazy spell. As I continue to explore the Abbey, I picked up the Lacerating Weapon, which is a Radiant spell that infuses my weapon with bleed, which is going to be very helpful in a few minutes. In fact, it's going to be helpful the next couple seconds because once I entered the Empyrean, it was time to take on Judge Cleric. Now, like some of the other bosses I've defeated in this run, Judge Cleric is obviously pretty resistant to holy damage, but she is kind of weak to bleed, and so I used the Hammer of Holy Agony in this fight because it does 80 bleed damage, plus with the Lacerating Weapon spell I picked up earlier, that adds 33% bleed onto my weapon, so we were doing about 103 bleed damage per hit, which was pretty good. With a few well-timed parries, I was able to hit a critical attack on Judge Cleric, getting her down to phase 2. Now this fight ended up being a little bit closer than I thought it would be, but thankfully towards the end of the fight I was able to proc a bleed, and with a few more bloody bonks, the judge gets judged by the true judge. I make my way back to Skyrise Bridge where, with the Judge Cleric's Remembrance, I purchase a Judge Cleric Spear. This thing is insane because it does pretty good amount of holy damage, but it also does 100 smite buildup, which is absolutely huge. I take a moment to get my spear up to +8. And after socketing some runes that increases the smite buildup and holy damage, I make my way to Upper Calrath where it was time to take on the Light Reaper. Oh my goodness, that damage is insane. Shockingly, we're able to get the Light Reaper down to less than half health before phase 2. I'm telling you, this damage is absolutely insane. The Light Reaper put up a pretty good fight at the end, but with a few more holy pokes on my spear, the Light Reaper goes down. With the Light Reaper taken care of, I'm able to access Brammus Castle. I do some hardcore parkour to pick up a Beryllium chunk. I make a pit stop at Skyrise Bridge to get the Judge Cleric Spear up to +10 with the Beryllium chunk I picked up earlier. And after socketing another rune onto my spear that increases my holy damage even more, I make my way back to Brammus Castle where it was time to take on King Brammus. Oh man, that damage is so good. Now King Bramus must be really weak to smite because I procced so many smites during this fight, and it only takes a few more holy pokes for the corrupted king to go down. With King Bramus defeated, I make my way to the realm of Rogar, where it was time to take on the final boss, Eidolon of Adir. Okay, that did not go as planned. It's time to lock in. With the Shadow of Adir defeated, that concludes our Radiance only run in Lords of the Fallen. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I thought this was an absolute blast to make, and I thought this run was just absolutely insane. Again, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. It was so much fun. I hope you all have a great day, a great night, a great morning, a great afternoon, a great whenever the hell it is you're watching this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.